Week 2 of the preseason ended ugly on the scoreboard, a 31-13 loss. And if you're watching this as a Cowboys fan, you know that score feels heavier than a preseason box score because a lot of the same questions keep showing up. Let's be honest, there were bright spots, but the overall performance didn't inspire much confidence. I'm going to walk you through the essentials so we're all on the same page. The defense showed flashes, especially at linebacker and on a highlight reel pick six from Andrew Booth, but the quarterbacks gave us far too many reasons to worry, and the run defense left holes that were exploited. That's the honest takeaway before we get into names and plays. For a minute, focus on the positives I saw. The linebackers were active when given space, and Damone Clark looked decisive and impactful in ways he hasn't always done. 7 tackles and 2 tackles for loss aren't preseason stats to overlook. Shamar James also flashed in run support and coverage, and even with Kenneth Murray out, the group found ways to make plays. Andrew Booth's pick six was the kind of high-effort, high-reward moment you want from a cornerback. Tight, high, and he finished the play. That single play can swing mood and momentum, and it's worth celebrating. But now the flip side. The quarterbacks were bad enough to wipe away a lot of the good work. Joe Milton finished with a shaky stat line and threw a pick. His rhythm disappeared early and never really returned. Will Grier had one great 33-yard strike, but the lack of consistent drives, the 0-for-5 stretch after the big play, is a real concern for depth chart clarity. When you combine sloppy QB play with drops and missed execution from receivers, the offense looks muddled, which forces the defense into longer stretches on the field and exposes run-fit issues. Speaking of running the ball, Javonte Williams not playing and Miles Sanders' limited impact tell you how the Cowboys are protecting core players, but it also means some backups needed to step up and didn't do enough. On the offensive line, there were good moments. Johnny Cornelius and Cooper Beebe had viewable plays, and the group limited pressures for stretches. Still, there were a few breakdowns late that led to pressure and stalled drives, so that's the mood check. Flashes of hope in the front seven and secondary, but a glaring quarterback question and run defense inconsistencies that prevented this from feeling like progress. Quick poll for you. Right now, drop a number 1 to 10 in the comments. How confident are you in this Cowboys team after that showing? And if you're not subscribed yet, help push the channel to 16,000 subscribers so we can keep these breakdowns rolling every game. Hit subscribe and give this video a like if you want more preseason detail. When you start digging past the final score, the truth is, the Cowboys defense gave us some genuine reasons to be encouraged. Let's start with the linebackers because they were clearly the heartbeat of this game. Even without Kenneth Murray suiting up, you could feel the activity from this group. Damone Clark was the standout, not just because of his stat line, but because of how he played. 7 tackles and 2 tackles for loss only tell part of the story. What really stood out was his anticipation. In past games, he's been guilty of reacting late, but this time he seemed to diagnose plays quicker and get downhill with intent. That's exactly the kind of growth the coaching staff wants to see. Right behind him, Shamar James had one of those performances that showed both volume and durability. He logged heavy snaps, made tackles, and aside from one slip-up in coverage, looked reliable. For a young guy fighting for a roster spot, that kind of workload in preseason is telling. The Cowboys clearly wanted to see how he'd handle extended reps, and he responded. Darius Harris had moments, a quarterback hit and a tackle for loss, but also a costly helmet leading penalty that can't be overlooked. Jack Sanborn played his role cleanly, and on nights like this, doing your job without mistakes matters. Then there's Andrew Booth. If you're making a highlight reel of this game, his pick six is going on top. He read the play, broke on the ball, and finished. That's the kind of moment corners need to pop on tape. Add in another pass breakup and the fact he only allowed 31 yards despite being targeted 7 times, and you've got a performance that pushes him forward in the depth chart battle. If there's a nitpick, he carried the pick a little high and loose, but overall he made a statement. Casey Hall also made plays. He gave up some yards after the catch but came down with an interception and tackled well. Zion Childress looked steady as a backup, and Keen Hall's tackling showed he can be a reliable rotational piece. On the front, James Houston flashed as a pass rusher with a couple of quarterback hits and pressures, and Perion Winfrey showed disruptive bursts with penetration into the backfield. These are the kinds of depth players who can swing preseason evaluations and give coaches confidence when starters need rest. So let me put it to you straight. Do you believe Damone Clark has done enough to lock in a spot on the 53-man roster? Drop a simple yes or no in the comments and tell me who your sleeper defensive standout was. If the defense gave us reasons to smile, the offense was the complete opposite, and we have to start with the quarterbacks because, plain and simple, they were the biggest disappointment of the night. Joe Milton finished 9 of 18 for 122 yards and an interception, and the numbers honestly looked better than the eye test. Early on, he was 1 of 4 for just 2 yards, and the interception summed up the issue. Late reads, poor placement, and no real rhythm. This wasn't a single bad drive. It stretched through the first half and never resolved. If you were hoping he'd push for a strong hold on the backup job, he didn't come close. Will Grier didn't exactly save the day either. His highlight was a beautiful 33-yard strike down the field to Princeton Fant, but after that he went 0 for 5. That kind of inconsistency is brutal in a quarterback battle. One big play isn't enough if you can't string together first downs. Right now, neither Milton nor Grier has inspired much confidence, and that's a major problem for the Cowboys' depth chart. You can see why some fans are already asking if Dallas needs to look outside the building for another option. The wide receivers didn't make life easier. Ryan Fanoy at least caught his 2 passes for 27 yards and avoided the drops that plagued others. And his special teams reps could be the deciding factor for that receiver 6 job. Tayon Holden barely got looks, and Jalen Cropper hurt his chances with a bad drop on what might have been Milton's best throw of the night. In preseason, those moments stick with coaches. The running back. Rotation gave us some clarity. Javonte Williams didn't play, clearly a sign he's locked in as RB1. Miles Sanders got 7 carries for 15 yards, which didn't move the needle much and was partly a product of inconsistent blocking. Phil Maffa had one nice 8-yard run but finished with low yards per carry, and the way the coaches rotate him behind Deuce Vaughn suggests he still has ground to make up. The offensive line deserves credit for holding up for stretches. Johnny Cornelius, Cooper Beebe, and Hakeem Adeniji had moments where they protected well, and that allowed Milton and Grier to get some dropbacks. But late-game breakdowns led to pressure that magnified the quarterback's struggles. When the offense isn't clicking, special teams start to matter more, and that's where guys like Fanoy can carve out a roster spot. If the regular season started today, who would you trust as the backup quarterback? Type JM for Joe Milton or WG for Will Grier in the comments. And if you're new, here, hit subscribe to help us reach 16,000. It's free, you won't miss a breakdown, and it really makes a difference. By the time the final whistle blew, the Cowboys had given us another mixed bag of preseason football, and honestly, more questions than answers. The scoreboard said 31-13, but the real story is what this game revealed about the roster battles. Some guys clearly helped their case, while others left the coaching staff shaking their heads. On the winners' side, Damone Clark and Shamar James proved they can be impact linebackers. Clark especially looked like a player who could secure a consistent role if he keeps stacking performances. Andrew Booth's pick 6 might end up being one of the signature moments of this preseason, the kind of play that cements a roster spot and boosts confidence heading into meaningful games. Add Casey Hall's interception and steady tackling, and suddenly the secondary doesn't look quite as shaky as it did on paper. Even rotational linemen, like Perion Winfrey, and edge rushers like James Houston showed enough disruption to make the coaches take notice. But on the losers' side, the quarterback position is the glaring headline. Joe Milton and Will Grier both struggled, And when you're trying to identify Dak Prescott's backup, you can't afford uncertainty. Fans may debate which one deserves the nod, but the reality is neither has locked down that job, and that will be one of the biggest stories to watch as the preseason winds down. Add in wideouts who failed to create consistent separation or who dropped game-changing throws, and running backs who didn't create much after contact, and you can see where the depth chart questions mount. The run defense also left lingering concerns. Even though the final numbers don't scream disaster, key breakdowns gave Baltimore chunk yardage at critical moments. Maisie Smith didn't consistently control the interior, and if that continues into the regular season, it could be a problem against more physical opponents. So where does this leave us? Some roster spots are already clear. Javonte Williams is RB1, and the coaches rested several veterans in a way that telegraphs their roles. But for fringe players, every snap matters, and performances like Clark's or Booth's might have shifted the conversation. Meanwhile, Milton and Greer have a lot of work to do, and time is running out. Now it's your turn. Who was the biggest Cowboys preseason winner in this game? Damone Clark, Andrew, Booth, Ryan Fenoy, or someone else entirely? Drop your pick in the comments and tell me why. If you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe. We're closing in on 16,000 subscribers, and your support helps bring you these breakdowns after every game. Share this video with a fellow Cowboys fan who needs the full picture of where the roster stands right now.